What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. I am Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and I am joined, as ever, by my fellow host, Lewis.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Yeah, good.
Good. Lawrence is still in Germany, so he unfortunately can't be with us, but he's doing very important laser training, which sounds so cool.
Definitely does.
Who knows what he's going to end up doing with them lasers? He's a crazy boy. So, we are going to give you your weekly dose of news and a bit of a topic as well. Lewis, have you had a good week?
Yeah. I've been keeping track of gaming news this week.
Oh, goody. Have you been able to play much?
Playing, no. I only played Stardew Valley.
Ooh, I've been meaning to get on that. Would you recommend it?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as long as you're okay with playing a game that's going to take a long time to get anywhere, but it is worth it.
I've heard that that's coming to the Switch, and that seems like a perfect kind of Switch game to me.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good idea for a Switch game.
That may be another good reason for me to buy a Switch. I'm really getting turned on that idea right now.
So, I mean, with regards to Switch, I think this week they released the TV ads. There's been a few TV ads for the Switch. And there's ones that are the other ones are right, but then the other one's the 1-2 Switch advertisement. I'm just I don't know.
1-2 Switch is a very interesting game. It's very good at showing off what the Switch can do. Equally, you imitate milking a cow whilst you stare at another person in the face. That is odd and intrusive and very weird. We had a demo of 1-2 Switch when we went to the Nintendo event, and we were being sort of guided through the demo by a woman who got far too into it, and I can't tell whether she was meaning to say half of the innuendos she was, but there's only a certain amount of times you can be told, oh yeah, that cow's loving that, before you're like, alright, you're not being paid enough for this job.
But yeah, so the 1-2 Switch advert, it's a £60 game.
Yeah, it is.
It's not bundled with it, in
it
a nice
feels
way.
like a pack-in, right?
It very much should be you get your Wii and you get your Wii Sports. Because it does not look like a £60 game at all.
I maybe wonder whether the Switch was originally supposed to be packed in with it, but in order to get it out earlier, they pulled it out of a pack-in and made it look like a launch game. So originally it was going to be like the Nintendo Land of the Switch, but rather than bundle it in, they kind of separated the two out to make it look like it had another title on launch day.
Well, yeah, it doesn't look like a £60 game.
No, it doesn't. And that's purely speculation. Also, why is it not called WarioWare? It's so obviously a WarioWare game. If they put that title on it, people would be so much more forgiving of what it is.
Yeah. But it's just, for the price. If it doesn't bomb, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if anyone's
It's going to bomb. I assure you, it's going to. That right there is a nuclear guarantee.
And that's the problem, isn't it? If this game is going to be, you said earlier in the last episode that we did about it being the flagship of what the Nintendo can do, the Nintendo Switch, and it's going to bomb and no one's going to play it. So why would you?
But we all know that the Switch is the first console in a long while to have a kind of what's it called when you have a game that's made to sell your console, like the Wii Sports of Wii was a it's got that unique selling point in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Because so many people didn't buy Wii U's and are now being kind of reminded that Breath of the Wild is here and looks up to date, that lots of people are going to buy a Switch to get Breath of the Wild in its full extent.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, Nintendo have actually kind of been really clever about having 1-2 Switch as a casual kind of game out on launch day, because let's face it, nobody's going to really buy it, but it certainly is a smart way to demo the console. It's a really smart way to show you every way you can play it and everything that it can do. It's just equally a smart way of them going, but we know you don't really care about this, so here's The Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but it definitely should be free with it.
But yeah, you're right. It has been a good week for the Switch. A lot of outlets have started to get their copies and their consoles of Legend of Zelda and the Switch as well. So we've been seeing a lot of kind of content of what the box is like, what its form factor compares to other things, what its unboxing is like. The box for it looks absolutely gorgeous. It's packed in beautifully. Everything is well sort of placed. I know that's a really weird criticism to have of a console, but actually when it's done right, it's done really right.
Although the Nintendo Switch has lost one of its launch titles.
Oh, yes, The Binding of Isaac?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not, it says still March, but it is kind of I don't know what it's got now, like 5 launch titles.
So I guess our first main sort of story for the week is that we're starting to see impressions and reviews for The Legend of Zelda, and impressions are just incredibly positive. The one review that's come out so far for it is Edge Magazine, and they've given it a straight 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Every impression I've seen of it so far is it's beautiful, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's brave, it's just everything positive that you can say about it. So well done them, because it seems like for a game that's been waited on so long and has so much expectance on it, for it to actually come out and not just perform, but maybe in this case overperform, is really, really good.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah,
because ultimately, let's be honest. In terms of the launch of the Nintendo, is almost entirely dependent on Zelda.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're not wrong there.
Which isn't, I don't want to badmouth Nintendo. It's not just them that's had that. When the Xbox came out and the PS4 came out, there was mostly the selling. There were games at the time. There were just 1 or 2 games that sold the console when both of the consoles released.
Yeah, it must be said that when they launched, they had a lot more third-party support. So it's like, if you paired back the third party, it's a very similar situation.
Yeah.
But Zelda is a really good thing to count on, especially with the amount of time we've been waiting for it. So yeah, it seems like good news all around for that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Equally good news, although maybe not for PlayStation fans, is there is more and more mounting evidence that Crash Bandicoot is not an exclusive to the PlayStation. Earlier this week, we had some more evidence come towards it, more ideas that people were seeing a lack of exclusivity on the box art, and then PlayStation Island tweeted out, the official PlayStation Island account tweeted out that Crash was coming to the PS4 and the PS4 Pro first, rather than exclusively. Now, there's a couple of questions that you have to ask here. It seems fairly obvious that if it's going to another platform, it's going to a console. Activision don't launch on PC a lot.
Yeah.
Certainly not platformers like this. And those games are made for a console audience. They wouldn't translate in the same way to PC. Just because 2D platformers are something... Well, 2.5D, 3D-ish platformers aren't something that the PC has a great deal of history with. Especially with that history kind of laying in Nintendo's ballpark for a long, long time. So the question is this coming to Xbox as some of the previous Crash titles did?
I reckon.
Or no, you go for it. The other opportunity is Switch.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm thinking, is that it's most likely to come to PS4 and Switch. With Xbox being I guess third in the list. It could very, very possibly come to Xbox, but if Nintendo aren't jumping on this, then they really should. Nintendo should right now be thinking, this is a game that we want on our console because it's the perfect game for our console.
My question for you is there actually more reason that they shouldn't be touching it? Because they're launching 2 Mario games this year for the Switch, Mario Kart 8, Mario Odyssey. And Mario, I would argue, to the generation of people who want this Crash reboot, that Crash is incredibly iconic.
Yeah.
Like, to our generation, who were the generation that are now really being targeted, the 18 to 27-year-olds, Crash is an incredibly iconic character. There's maybe Crash, Mario, Spyro that line up the main 3D platformers, especially for their age. And you have to wonder whether actually Nintendo would be better off saying, no, we don't want this. We want Mario. Because that is going to be like, if this does come to Xbox One and it comes to it later in the year, there will be a fight between Crash on Xbox One and Mario on the Switch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a question worth answering. Worth asking, I mean. I do think that they still should probably have it. I mean, it's better to have quantity rather than, well, to a certain level, you need quantity and quality.
Of course.
And in a world where the Wii U has like 5 games that are worth playing, you know.
And I guess it must be said that Mario Odyssey, I mean, you can almost count on that being of high quality. So maybe it makes sense for them to have the quantity of Crash and the quality of Mario simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess one of the problems that I feel that Nintendo has always had is that they don't want... They've got like this issue where they want to release a console, but they don't want to like lose money on that. Not lose money. Like, they want to only release their own games. They don't want any competition for their own games on their own console, right?
Yeah, of course.
Which ultimately leads to a problem where you don't sell games on your console. And you could argue that is part of the problem that they've experienced. But they are making steps in the right direction. So I mean, I do think that they should probably take on Crash Bandicoot. I reckon it's like one of the perfect games for it. I mean, like if you want to showcase why it's worth getting a Switch, you want these kind of games, you know?
Yeah, no, you're totally right there. Actually, it would be a really good showcase for what kind of games the Switch will be great for. That's very true.
I mean, also you have to look at the like the control scheme of Switch. Ultimately, it's never going to be. Well, I mean, if you're using like the Joy-Cons, it's never quite going to be as versatile as having or quite as nice, I guess, as having a proper controller. So, you know, it's still going to suit games that are 2D and, you know, 2.5D, like Crash.
So more news this week. Of course, Mass Effect Andromeda has just gone gold, actually really quite recently. Although some of the impressions that have come out this week for Mass Effect Andromeda have said that there may be a little more buggy moments in it than we're used to.
Buggy moments.
There's buggy moments, yeah, both in terms of the Mako and actual bugs.
So how buggy are we talking? Arkham Knight, Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed Unity? Are we talking no faces? I don't know.
I don't think anybody can get Assassin's Creed Unity buggy. That's a standard that we have to have passed by now. I don't know how buggy particularly, just sort of notably buggy. It must be said that there's rumors of a day one patch, and let's face it, it wouldn't be that surprising. It's something we're fairly used to at this point. So hopefully the performance kind of gets boosted than what people have seen in impressions. But nonetheless, Mass Effect Andromeda, one of the biggest games easily of the year in terms of quantity, has gone gold.
Just to quickly talk about day one patches, I want to just kind of like support Square Enix with Final Fantasy 15, because they had a day one patch that was actually like added loads of content to the game. It's nice to see games where day one patches are a reason to add more content as opposed to like.
But doesn't that suck for anyone playing it offline?
Oh yeah, no, it definitely does. Let's not say it doesn't, but I mean, like, it's nice to see that as opposed to sort of here's a load of bug fixes that we should have done earlier.
The next piece of news is Overwatch are teasing their latest hero, or potentially 2 heroes. Earlier this week on their official blog, Overwatch updated with a new blog post from the universe of Overwatch, introducing a character called, I believe it's Effie Oladele. If I pronounced that wrong or got it wrong, please forgive me. and she is an 11-year-old computer expert who may look to be a tank in the near future. But recently, the game itself was updated on the PTR region, which is a PC-only area where Blizzard can kind of test things before they go live to the game, kind of like a beta that constantly runs. And the Numbani map, which is the airport and museum, has had the Doomfist stolen and the airport destroyed by some massive attack. It seems like we might be in for one new hero, but whether it will be one new hero and that one be Doomfist or Effie, maybe it's both. Either way, I would expect personally an update on Tuesday. Maybe that will be an animated short, the announcement of a hero and an update to the PTR, and then the actual hero the week after, or the full-on reveal and everything on Tuesday. We'll see, but it seems like it's going to happen really, really soon, and you can be sure that when it does, we will have a video review up for one or both heroes, as we have had for everyone so far, and I'll put a link in the description for the ones that we've put up so far if you're interested. They're all very good. And then the final piece of news this week is that the latest Arkham game may have been leaked. A Reddit post that came from somebody claiming to be an employee at Warner Brothers Montreal has leaked details of a potential new Arkham game. It's called Arkham Insurgency, and it's being developed at Warner Brothers Montreal, apparently. So the game is set 3 years after the original Arkham prequel, Arkham Origins, and takes place in a coastal region with Batman this time coming up against the Court of Owls. But interestingly, you don't just play as Batman this time, you play as Batman and Robin, and as a result, the combat system has been tweaked. Some of the things to make note of this time round, if the leak is to be real, is that the game is going to be the same size as Arkham Knight's map, but with expanded detail given to interiors. Now this worries me slightly, but we'll get on to why in a second. The Batmobile is back, but the tank has been drastically changed.
Is that so it works?
Sorry, did it ever work on the PC?
Yeah, eventually. After like half a year.
And the final thing to note is that a lot of the characters are sort of less focused on almost B-list characters, which is actually a pretty interesting little way to go. So, Lewis, I would like to propose a topic of the week to you, and that is, do the Arkham games need to chill? Have we had too many Arkham games? Are you sick of them? What do you think of this leak?
So, it depends really. I mean, like, I felt that Arkham Knight went too much in the direction of something like Assassin's Creed, Unity, where like you've got repetitions all over the place of similar blocks of things to do, activities to do. This was specifically Arkham Knight, is that lots of the side story stuff, instead of being interesting content, was repeat this process again and again and again. And one of the things I loved about City was that each kind of side story had kind of an interesting storyline, for the most part. I mean, they were present in Arkham Knight, but then they were kind of like a bit short and not as interesting, in my opinion. And I think if they can kind of get all the writing together and do it properly, then there could be a really good Arkham game out there. But it's not been really good in the last few, the last two. In my opinion, it could have been a lot better. And I think like we've had amazing writing in some other games. I just wish that they would bring it back and kind of focus really on having one solid story. I mean, like, so for example, if this Insurgency rumor leak is true, I mean, like, there's a list here of sort of 12 different characters. 13 bad guys, and I can't picture them all having an interesting story unless they do something like Arkham City, where they weave them all together.
See, and this is where I think actually the Insurgency link has some really interesting details, because many of these bad guys, if not all of them, haven't been in previous Arkham games, or they've only been referenced. So here, Warner Brothers. So something that I really dislike about Warner Brothers Montreal's previous games is that they were very limited by what the Arkham series has done before. Like, the Joker had to be Mark Hamill's Joker, Bane had to do certain things, Batman had to look a certain way, and Gotham had to do certain things. And I kind of like the idea that they're looking at being in a different city, playing with different bad guys so that they can really take their own spin on it.
Yeah. It is worth saying quickly that Joker's on this list.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, bollocks.
Which is a little bit of a question that needs to be answered, but yeah, go on.
Something that worries me about what's said here is that I think the thing that Origins really missed is that its world was empty. Playing Arkham Origins was like, it was like running around in any kind of gothic city. It didn't feel like Gotham. Arkham Knight absolutely nailed it with its different districts and its nods to the comics, and the way that it captured the feeling of having asylums on one side and lighthouses on the other, and the way it got architecture. It was modern, it was old, it felt like it had been lived in. Like, it felt like people had developed at different times and there was a history to this place. Whereas Arkham Origins, it kind of felt like there were two plump downs of the same architecture, and it was all a bit blocky, and it felt bland except for the places where they clearly focused on. And I like the idea that they're expanding interiors in this game. I like the idea that you can maybe wander into random buildings that don't have any real purpose in the game, but they're just there to add character. But I only like that if they're really adding to the world.
Yeah.
And they really have the space to do this now that they're going outside of Gotham, if this leak is true. But I still don't know whether it's the right kind of idea for them.
So my other big problem really with it is that, like, you know, I mean, it says here that it's in a new coastal area that's similar size to the 3 islands from Arkham Knight. I think Arkham Knight was too big. I think, like, one of the beautiful things about Arkham City is it's literally like 2 minutes from one end to the other map to the other end of the map. It's a really small map as it comes down to it. There isn't actually that much. Well, when you play it feels massive because each, like, building has its own thing going on, and each, like, each tiny section of that game has something going on in it.
It's small but dense.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, you know, there is an actual mission that takes 2 minutes to get. Like, you've got to rush from one side of the island, one side of the area to the other side of the area, other side of the map, and it is like a 2-minute thing. It's very quick, but like the point is that it still doesn't feel that small when you're playing it because it's just really dense, as you say. And I think, personally, instead of measuring a game by how big it is, you know, we should be looking at, like, how much we can fit in, how much we can make it interesting in a small area. Because I think Arkham Knight was too big. Arkham Origins was definitely too big.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think Arkham Knight was a fine size. I think it couldn't have been any bigger, but I'm glad that it was as big as it was. I felt there was a really big sense of scale to it. I think the thing that made me feel like that, though, was that Rocksteady had previously done City and Asylum, where they demonstrated that they could tell a Batman story on a much smaller sort of returning scale. Arkham Asylum is such an incredible game because of how claustrophobic it is. And I really got a sense that Rocksteady could tell a story in Arkham wherever they set it, which I haven't had that feeling with Warner Brothers Montreal yet. They can clearly tell a fine, not great, but a fine story in a large area. But, like, I'd kind of like to see them just put Bloodhaven in as, like, or go to Arkham Asylum. Like, I'd kind of like to see them do a smaller scale story and then build on it in their way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because, I mean, ultimately the problem with Origin, I think, really is that, talking about, like, map scale, is that was, like, one of the first things that was, or at least it feels like it was one of the first most important parts of the game, was to be like, how big are we going to make this map? Yeah. Where are we going to hide all the trophies, that kind of stuff? Well, there isn't any trophies there in that one. There isn't, like, the special things, but there is trophies, isn't there?
There's Riddler bits rather than trophies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would really like to see a more linear Arkham game. I think one of the nice things about Asylum is it's one of the only ones that kind of takes you through the entire story. Because it is very much like this, then that, then this, then that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of like, one of the things although City does it as well, but I think the other two, in my opinion, there's little, in times there's little motivation to continue. Obviously in certain bits there's massive motivations, but
I would argue that Night does that really well as well. It just, because the world is so big, there's also a lot of pressure to do everything else in it as well. Because, like, so in City, you stumble on the side quests and they're just there for you to complete. And that's the same with Night, but there's just so much content in it that you stumble on them much more frequently. So I get what you mean, but I think if you replay Night through with the intention of going through the story, there is a kind of... and actually, I really, really like the way that Night does it, because there is such an impending sense of doom and gloom in that game that if you're going through the story alone, there is such a kind of, I need to do this, I need to do that.
I still think I'd like to see it more linear. I think, like, there needs to be a longer story, really, or more, not longer, but like, so like, say in the case of Night, actually, a good positive part of Night, it's interactions like between, spoilers, between Batman and Joker. Like, the writing there is really good, and I think, like, the problem is, I think there's writing elsewhere that could have been better, and I really want to see them focus like heavily on the writing side. And admittedly, I think Montreal's probably not the. You say Montreal, the ones doing this one, Origins. They're probably not the one to do it. Although, on the positive side of Arkham Origins, there is positives, I think, in my opinion. Is that I liked the way it brought the bosses in a bit more. It made them a bit more, although it's a bit annoying, but it was a bit more, so if we compared Origins to Night, there's bits in Night where you kind of finish off your side quest and then you capture the boss and it's kind of over with. Whereas in Origins, it was much more like an interactive, like, fight or something that would happen.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And you didn't have to fight a ninja in a tank, like in Night. You know, that amazing ninja that's like really good at fighting and just uses a tank.
What, like that amazing 8th boss Electrocutioner who adds so deeply to that game?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the question I would put to you in that case is, do you think we need less Arkham games, or do you think we need better Arkham games? Because I'll tell you my stance of where I am now. I can't fucking wait for this. I'm all in. I love the Arkham games. I love everything about them. I love the way they tell their story. I love the combat. I love the gameplay. I love the world building. I even love Arkham Origins. I shit on it all the time. But I said right when it came out, if that is Warner Brothers Asylum, great. Go for it. Build on that and do it well. I cannot wait for another Arkham game. It's been like 3 years, I think. Yes, give it to me. Put it all in my face, please. But I realise that is not the popular opinion about Arkham games anymore. So where do you, as a kind of more measured opinion on the franchise, stand? So
to start off with, I think we should have a look at the times that you have not been on a hype train, just in general. You're always on the hype train for everything, and I feel like I'm always off the hype train, unless it's Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy VII, motherfucker.
Yeah, apart from that. Maybe Crash Bandicoot at this point. But yeah, so I think in my opinion, like, the Telltale Batman kind of brought me back into it a lot. You know, I've always been a big Batman fan, and I really like that game. And they really kind of brought me back into Batman again. I'm on the side of the people that think, at least to some level, that they need to make them better. I think we can disagree, but I think personally Night and Origins were a bit weak. And like, I think I think that if they really, I think they could make another good game, another really good game. I think like when I say Night's weak, I mean it's not as good as the other two, not necessarily like it's bad or anything. It's we're talking like small differences, but I think that like they could make a game that's kind of similar story wise. No, the same quality story as something like Witcher. If they really like went deep into like quests and really like spent a lot of time focused on the story of them and fleshing them all out, and like you have to admit that in Arkham Knight, some of those side missions were just in there for the sake of having side missions. There's definitely like a few that were just like that.
I don't think it's fair to say they were in there for the sake of having side missions, but I agree that Arkham City got the side missions better.
I think there's certain bits of Arkham Origins that have really good stories. Like the isn't Arkham Origin where they brought in the crime scene following the laser stuff, or is that in City?
The crime scene following the lasers?
Yeah.
No, that they did that originally in City, and they did it they actually did it kind of better in Arkham Origins because you had the rewind and the fast forward function, I think, in Origins. So like in City you could I may be getting this wrong actually, but in City you could scan crime scenes and find kind of specific points which would track back or forward, whereas in Origins you had a rewind and a fast forward button where you had to find those points in order to progress it. It was a better system, but I think there's ways that they could improve it, and actually I think Telltale's Batman did a really good job of that. Yeah,
I do think that like this is ultimately what I want. Like I think if we could combine Telltale and Warner Bros. And make it actually like the story of Telltale, but with the combat and gameplay. Because the problem ultimately is that we're always going to be. I feel like that we get torn between the two all the time. We never really get quite this one focus on it. I think that's really like my problem.
I really, really think the main story of Arkham Knight is that good. Like I think, and the way it tells its story as well with those characters is really good. But I've done this before in the review and Game of the Year and so on and so forth, so I won't stand on this soapbox any longer. I think, though, it's fair to say that we're both in, just one of us is in a lot more than the other.
I guess, like, I'm in, but, like I am in for it, don't get me wrong.
Cautiously in.
But yeah, I guess I'm more cautious. Whereas you're, like, leaping in.
Fair enough. I will say, though, if this turns out to be true, this is going to be PlayStation stage at E3 and out in October.
Oh, it would be PlayStation, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, it would have to. I mean, almost certainly, unless Xbox have gone out of their way to get the marketing for it this time. Unless Switch. Who knows?
Oh, no.
Probably not.
Switch exclusive.
You know what? I shudder at that, but I would actually play the fuck out of this on the Switch. If it were exclusive to the Switch, I would be I'd be all right with that.
Yeah.
Because of the way the Switch plays. But if you want more details on how the Switch plays, you can check out our episode last week where we gave all our Switch impressions, and I think that will leave us quite nicely on the topic of the week for this week. Lewis, what are you going to be playing in the week ahead of us?
So probably more Stardew. I've been playing a lot of that at the moment, and I completed Deus Ex and I've completed some other stuff, so I'm just trying to kind of complete all the main things at the moment.
Fair dues. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be playing. I played a little bit more of Dishonored 2. I got to the Clockwork Mansion, which is really cool, but I'm feeling less and less motivation to get through it. So I'm going to take that really slowly, because I appreciate and respect that the game is fantastic. I'm just not as driven to finish it. And then I will, of course, continue with my horrible addiction that is Overwatch. That will be my week. Thank you very much for joining me, as ever. Yeah,
it's been good. It's been interesting. I mean, like, you've told me news that I didn't know, so that's always good.
Yeah, I feel like we've had an educational podcast this week.
Yeah, definitely.
Or not. And if you feel that you learned something new here, or if you just like what you heard, please feel free to maybe consider subscribing to the show, because we've been putting these out every week now for about 4 weeks, and we plan to keep on going. So we'd hate you to miss anything. No, we'd hate for you to miss anything, not we'd hate you. That would be awful. We also have a Facebook page and a Twitter, both of which you can find in the description below if you're interested. And a quick plug, this week for my work, I got to interview a gentleman who produces video for IGN UK. It was really interesting, some of the stuff he said about social platforms and VR, how he came to get his job. And he was like a mature graduate who used to do steelworking. So like he's had a really, really interesting life and a really interesting point. He's got a really interesting story of getting to IGN. I'll link that in the description below if you're interested in checking that out as well. Feel free to do so, and we greatly appreciate it. So all of that is in the description below, and until next week, thanks again, and the game's up.